Hello again, and welcome to this GCSE History revision video. Today we're focusing on the achievements of Francis Drake. Let's start by looking at the big picture of Drake's achievements. Now, as you know, Drake was an exceptionally good sailor, so his achievements are all connected with voyages at sea. Firstly, his privateering, by which we mean illegal trading and raiding on Spanish settlements and ships in the New World. Secondly, his voyage of 1577, during which he circumnavigated the globe. Now, in 1585, after years of growing tension, war broke out between England and Spain. After that, Drake made two important contributions to England's victory. Firstly, his raid on the Spanish fleet at Cadiz, and secondly, his role as a vice admiral during the events of the Spanish Armada. We'll look at all of these events in a little more detail. As we do, begin to think about which was his most significant achievement. When you're doing that, you might bear some of these criteria in mind. Which of Drake's actions increased England's status as a naval power? Which damaged the wealth and power of England's greatest enemy, Spain? Which of Drake's achievements brought wealth or other valuable gains to England and to Elizabeth? And which of Drake's achievements increased England's defence and security? So the first achievement we're going to talk about is Drake's privateering. The context here is that by the 16th century, Spain, which was Europe's most powerful country, controlled much of the New World and therefore was able to obtain all the precious resources there, particularly gold and silver, which was the source of much of Spain's wealth. You can imagine Spanish galleons loaded with this treasure crossing the Atlantic to bring the wealth back to Spain. Meanwhile, Spain shut out English merchants from trading in the New World by denying them a license. At the same time, England's most valuable trade, the wool trade, through the Netherlands, was being disrupted by the Dutch revolt there and by a Spanish embargo in 1563. For these reasons, English merchants were keen to find other sources of wealth. Now, Drake was a notorious privateer. In Spanish eyes, he was a pirate. He traded illegally with Spanish colonies in the New World and raided their ships and settlements. Examples of this include his 1564 voyage on board his cousin John Hawkins' boat, during which they traded enslaved peoples from West Africa in Venezuela. And then the 1567 voyage, again with his cousin, in which they attempted to do the same in the Caribbean, but were lucky to escape with their lives after the Spanish attacked them. And in 1572, he led a successful privateering voyage of his own to raid Panama, acquiring much treasure. These privateering voyages were important for a number of reasons. Firstly, they damaged Spain's reputation as the most powerful naval power, and they weakened Spain's economy by interrupting its supply of gold from the New World. Secondly, they contributed to increasing tension between England and Spain, though we should not forget that this did not lead directly to war between the two countries. Philip II viewed them more as an annoyance rather than a reason to declare war on England. Drake also brought back treasure, which improved England's finances, enabling Elizabeth to balance her budget without requiring extra taxation from Parliament. And his voyages brought great profits for his investors, which encouraged others to invest in future privateering and exploration voyages. For his second achievement, let's focus on Drake's 1577 voyage in greater detail. This is the journey on which Drake circumnavigated the globe. Now, at that time, Spain and Portugal were considered Europe's strongest naval powers. Due to new navigational technology like astrolabes, sailors could sail further out at sea and for longer. In 1519, this enabled a Portuguese sailor, Ferdinand Magellan, to become the first man to sail around the globe, bringing huge prestige to his country. Meanwhile, England had only a small navy and no presence in the Americas. While Spain and Portugal were busy setting up colonies there, England had none, and this prevented it from matching Spanish wealth and power. In 1577, Drake sailed from Plymouth on his ship the Golden Hind. Once again, he engaged in privateering, raiding Spanish settlements in Peru and capturing the vast Spanish galleon, the Cacafuego, and its precious treasures. On this journey, he sailed round the southern tip of the Americas and reached the west coast of America, which we would call California today. There, he claimed territory for Elizabeth, calling it Nova Albion, before returning home across the Pacific, stopping to trade with various islands on the way. When he returned, Elizabeth rewarded him for his efforts by knighting him aboard his ship, making him Sir Francis Drake. Now, the voyage was important for a number of reasons. Firstly, Drake's actions weakened Spain by showing publicly that England did not accept Spanish domination of the New World. Drake's raids once again weakened Spain's finance and interrupted the flow of treasure to Philip II. It thus angered Philip. However, once again, this did not lead directly to war. Philip was furious that Elizabeth seemed to reward Drake by knighting him, but this alone was not enough to lead Philip to declare war on England. England's finances were also improved, not only by the £140,000 worth of treasure that they seized from the Cacafuego, but also the new trade links with Pacific Islands, which opened up new markets for English merchants. Drake became only the second man to sail around the world, and this boosted English spirits and England's status as a great sailing nation. And by bringing back useful navigational information, as well as reassuring descriptions of friendly native peoples in North America, and a huge profit, his voyage encouraged further exploration and settlement in America, which in the long term contributed to the setting up of England's first colonies there. Next, let's look at Drake's raid on Cadiz in 1587. Now, by this time, England and Spain were already at war. The war had been triggered by Elizabeth's decision to send an army to fight the Spanish in the Netherlands, to prevent Spain from crushing the Dutch Protestants there. Philip was furious about this and began building a vast fleet of ships to invade England. Now, while the Spanish were preparing, Drake led a daring raid on the Spanish fleet. In a cheeky and audacious move, he sailed straight past the defences into Spain's great harbour at Cadiz. And there he did terrible damage to Spanish preparations, destroying 30 supply ships and their food and provisions. On the way back, he captured another Spanish treasure ship, the San Felipe. The event was so humiliating for Philip that it became known as singeing the King of Spain's beard. Drake's raid mattered for several reasons. Firstly, humiliating Philip in this way angered him, and it increased tensions, though this did not lead to war as the two countries were already fighting by this point in the Netherlands. It did, however, raise English morale and confidence at an important time when England was facing the prospect of an invasion by Europe's most powerful nation. The money Drake brought back was also important to Elizabeth, who used it to improve England's defences. But alongside treasure, it also bought Elizabeth time. The Armada was delayed by 12 months thanks to Drake's raid, which gave Elizabeth time to prepare. This may have been crucial to England's victory. Finally, let's look at that victory itself by focusing on Drake's role in the Armada. Now, the Armada was Spain's invasion fleet, a vast force of 130 ships. After the delay caused by Drake's raid on Cadiz, it finally sailed for England in 1588. Now, it tried to maintain a crescent formation or half-moon shape. This was essential for protecting the Spanish galleons, which were larger and heavier than English ships. Philip's plan for the Armada was that it would sail down the English Channel and arrive at Calais in France, where it would gather the Spanish Duke of Parma's troops before crossing the Channel to invade England. Now, at the time of the Armada, Drake was a Vice Admiral in the English Navy. During the events of the Armada, he made 3 important interventions. Firstly, when the Armada hoped to wait in the English Channel, Drake's forces chased the Armada, hurrying it along, and this meant that it arrived at Calais before the Duke of Parma was ready. Secondly, while the Armada was waiting at Calais, Drake led an attack on it using fireships. Several English ships were loaded with gunpowder, set alight, and floated at the Spanish galleons. The Spanish panicked. They cut their anchors and they fled out to sea. Then, thirdly, during the major sea battle of the Armada at Gravelines off the coast of France, Drake encouraged English ships to use the tactic of maintaining their distance from the Spanish and firing from a broadside position. This means positioning themselves side on towards the Spanish ships so that they could fire with all their cannons at once, doing greater damage. Now, Drake's actions were important for the English victory. Firstly, by hurrying the Armada along the Channel, he ruined the Spanish plan to meet the Duke of Parma's forces at Calais. Instead, the Armada arrived too soon, and it was forced to wait there at Calais, where it was vulnerable to English attack. Secondly, with his fireship attack, he broke the Spanish formation, leaving the Spanish galleons more vulnerable to the English. Thirdly, his tactics at Gravelines helped the English sink one Spanish galleon and kill many Spanish sailors without losing any ships of their own, giving them the victory at this battle. But of course, Drake's tactics were not the only factor involved here. The faster, more manoeuvrable design of the English ships helped too, as did the weather, which was stormy and with poor visibility. These conditions favoured the English, who were more used to fighting in such waters. So before we finish, let's return to our big picture and consider those criteria again. Using these criteria, which of Drake's achievements do you think was the most significant and why? Thanks for watching this video. If you found it useful, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Remember, you'll find lots of other useful GCSE history videos there.